All right, so picking up at this transition point, I've kind of just got so excited about this passage, I decided to keep going and dive into this turnaround because this right here sounds just like depression. I don't know if anybody has ever been in this place of feeling like God has turned darkness into light. So this isn't just I'm experiencing darkness to light. This is like legitimately God is against me. The universe is against me. Nothing is going to go right. I'm just waiting for my life to end, like right here, the bear lying in wait. And more than that, my life is already ended. Like, I don't even feel alive anymore. And my soul continually remembers it and is bowed down within me. So the soul being bowed down, I think that is such beautiful imagery to describe something that is absolutely terrible, is this feeling of depression and hopelessness. There is no tomorrow. And this is a description in this passage of the day of the anger of the Lord. But this I call to mind. So the author is intentionally putting something into his mind. And what is he putting into his mind? This right here is how he opens the next section. It's in fact a whole section. It's a longer section than the first part, if we're just counting the chapter. But because this book is 6 chapters long, it's really right in the center of the whole poem. This is the centerpiece, this shifting of something. And so we want to know, what is it that changes him from hopeless to hopeful? And I think he could just say this, the steadfast love of the Lord. Now he's talking on behalf of a whole people, because this other translation here, and this follows like a different, when you follow streams of the Hebrew back, this is the Syriac Targum Hebrew, is different than potentially the Latin Vulgate, which takes all of the Hebrew and translates the whole thing into Latin. So we're looking at ancient texts, and sometimes the texts diverge in their exact language that they carry. We are not cut off. So this is referring specifically to a threat that comes from the covenant that the people of Israel made with God, that they would be cut off if they completely violated the covenant. But this isn't happening. Because why? Because of the steadfast love of the Lord. And the reason why this is interesting to me, I'm actually going to show you, because back here in the book of Exodus, let's see where. I don't know exactly where it is, but it's where Moses goes up to the mountain and asks to see God. Is it right here? Yes. Please show me your glory. And when the face of the Lord passes by and Moses hears God, I referred to this the other day in the baptism of Jesus and the transfiguration on the mountain, because those are the 2 other times where you have a voice coming from heaven. And so I think it's really significant when you have a voice coming to declare something, that thing is important. So the Lord passed before him and proclaimed. So part of God's revealing himself is through language. The Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. So it continues on and on. But anyway, when steadfast love and faithfulness is something mentioned here, the other people who are reading, because those who knew how to read and write, so the literate people of the day, which were probably very few, they would have also been reading the Torah. And that was probably why they learned how to read in the first place. So they would know this, and they would recognize that the steadfast love of the Lord is inbuilt into the very identity of God and how he revealed himself to Moses. It's also all over the place. I think in the book of Deuteronomy, you get the steadfast love of the Lord everywhere. So when we think about God, I usually think in terms of Old Testament revelation as steadfast love and faithfulness. Mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your... Look, there's the word. Like, I just love how this whole book ties together. It's a story of people's interaction with one being known as Jehovah, a promise carried by one man and his descendants, Abraham. And so it is no surprise that there is a storyline that ties together from start to finish. And you have the prophet Jeremiah writing here, hundreds of years after the prophet David, hundreds, probably 1,000 years after Abraham. And all of these people have a story, and the story is about the same being. And so it's no wonder that the story lines up. The Lord is my portion, says my soul, therefore I will hope in him. So all of this stuff, the children, the city, the body, all of this is gone. But the Lord is my portion, says my soul, therefore I will hope in him. This kind of sounds like David's writing now. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. All of these terrible things have happened, and now he's saying, but I remember this. This sounds just like so much quietness after so much chaos, and now waiting for something. Waiting for the goodness of the Lord, the steadfast love, the faithfulness, salvation, the rescue. Remember, salvation means something, and it doesn't mean praying a prayer so you don't go to hell. Salvation is a word that we first see. I'll take you all the way back here again to the beginning. Salvation is a word that we see in the book of Exodus for the first time. This is also the name Joshua. So this word has very specific meanings to these people. And you see salvation happening in the crossing of the Red Sea. Right here, people are standing in front of the sea. The Egyptian army is coming after them to recapture them or to kill them. They have no idea. And Moses said, "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord." There is no way out of the situation, and God is going to make one. In that case, it was through the water. Here, he has no freaking clue. How is this going to happen? He doesn't know. But he's going to wait quietly for it. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. Is he referring to himself? I don't know. And I don't know why he's talking about youth at this point. Let him sit alone in silence when it is laid on him. And if you think about a yoke, those of you who didn't grow up out in the country, might have seen in movies when you have two pairs of oxen or, usually it's just cattle that are yoked together. But it's a heavy wooden beam that's laid across their shoulders. And it allows you to attach a plow or a wagon or something else in between them so that both of them contribute equally to pulling on it. So a yoke is a burden to pull. And it's like, okay, this idea of youth is like strength and ability to hold it. Let him sit alone in silence when it is laid on him. Let him put his mouth in the dust. There may yet be hope. Mouth in the dust was something that was very demeaning for these people. Let him give his cheek to the one who strikes, and let him be filled with insults. Why? Why should he go through all of these things? This doesn't sound like very much fun. Here's the author's explanation. For the Lord will not cast off forever, but though he cause grief, and this is interesting because this flies in the face of a lot of modern theology where we say, oh, well, the Lord does not cause grief. The Lord only brings the compassion. It's the devil that causes grief. But that is not how the prophet sees it here. He sees God as being the one who's causing grief and having compassion, according to the abundance of his steadfast love, according to his identity. So again, this being Jehovah with the identity of steadfast love causes grief, casts off, lays a yoke upon the youth. All of these things are things that people see God does. He's not just some passive, ooh, I'm feeling loving today kind of force up in the sky. For he does not afflict from his heart. Remember this word that opened the chapter? I am the man who has seen affliction under the rod of his wrath. Now we're coming to balance out this understanding, the contrast between the prophets and today's preachers. Some of them fall on the side of beware of the wrath of God, and you're going to think that the identity of God is wrath. And then you get, on the other hand, the identity of God is only compassion. He doesn't cause grief. But here, the explanation is he does not afflict from his heart. And furthermore, does not grieve the children of men. Grieve is a big word, and I don't know where it is. I think it's in Ephesians chapter 4, where you have the second out of 3 examples that are coming to mind for me right now. Is it 4? It may not be 4. 5. 6. I believe the do not provoke your children to anger. I think this is similar. And then there's also the do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God by whom you are sealed. And I can't remember the reference for that right now. But that is the idea of grieving. He does not afflict from the heart or grieve the children of men. And yet, he caused grief. What? So, we understand that the afflictions that one experiences from God do not come from the heart. And that is really a relief. It's almost like they come from necessity. And in the case of the nation of Israel, they had made a covenant, an agreement with God, that if they were to violate their covenant, all these things were going to happen. Or is it blessings for obedience? Yes. But if you will not obey the voice of the Lord your God, and be careful to do all his commandments and statutes that I command you, then all these curses shall be upon you. Cursed in the city, curses, confusion, frustration, defeating before your enemies, confusion of mind. The ground doesn't bring forth fruit. The king, you will serve other gods, did not obey. So like all of these things, the nation will come against you like an eagle. Start looking into symbolism of nations. The eagle is a very interesting one. This is all the disaster. And the people made this covenant. Their whole bloodline made this covenant. And God is holding people to it hundreds of years later, though not from his heart. He would far rather they had kept the covenant so that he could do the blessings instead of the cursings, because that is the heart. Causing grief, but does not. For he does not, I would potentially rephrase this, for he does not from his heart afflict or grieve the children of men. This is a standalone phrase, and this up here is a standalone phrase. Yeah. So it's not that grief doesn't come at all from God, it's that the grief and affliction do not come from his heart. And in the Old Testament concept, heart stood for the core, the identity, the very nature of one's being. It wasn't just a blood pumping organ like it is for some of us. Let's continue on, see what we have. To crush underfoot all the prisoners of the earth, to deny a man justice in the presence of the Most High, to subvert a man in his lawsuit the Lord does not approve. Really? Okay, this is interesting. Is this what was happening? Oh. It looks as though the conquering army had done something that they shouldn't have done. They denied justice in the presence of the Most High. This is a particular way of referring to God in terms of power and military strength. To subvert a man in his lawsuit, the Lord does not approve. I wonder who is bringing the lawsuit. Who has spoken and it came to pass unless the Lord has commanded it? Is it not from the mouth of the Most High that good and bad come? Oh my gosh. This is amazing. Like, this is so countercultural right now. Both good and the bad come from the mouth of the Most High. Why should a living man complain, a man about the punishment of his sins? It is not possible to go through this section quickly. Wow. So, justice was incredibly important to God, and in fact, the reasons given oftentimes for the destruction of cities was that they had left behind justice. And then here we're talking about law, and let's remember this idea of steadfast love and covenant faithfulness, which is how God identifies throughout the Old Testament. I wonder if somebody is, in a sense, bringing a lawsuit against God. So we look at this as steadfast love, covenant faithfulness has to do with upholding justice. And who has spoken, unless the Lord commanded it? So again, two ways of looking at this, and here's where biblical interpretation gets interesting, because we don't really know, when it comes to poetic writing, if there was one specific meaning or if there are multiple implied meanings to every section. And usually when you have really great poets, they write with multiple meanings and everything. So you can see one potential: people are upset with God, bringing a lawsuit against God. Or maybe there is some subversion of justice by the conquering nation. Who can say? But we remember that whether it's good or it's bad, it's coming from the mouth of the Most High. Why should a living man complain? And then we have punishment of his sins. This is basically saying we received what we said we would receive. We cursed, we accepted this curse upon ourselves if we were to break our covenant. So this notion of law is really wrapped up in here when we look back where we did in the book of Deuteronomy at the covenant. Let us test and examine our ways and return to the Lord. He has figured it out. He's like, look, essentially we brought this upon ourselves. Let us lift up our hearts and hands to God in heaven. We have transgressed and rebelled. And unlike all of the multitude of previous times, you have not forgiven. So essentially, we received what was coming to us. God kept his part of the covenant. We said, if we break it, do this to us. It's like people who are saying, let me be killed if I break my word. They broke their word, and God kept his. You have wrapped yourself with anger and pursued us, killing without pity. You have wrapped yourself with a cloud that no prayer can pass through. There was no ability to ask for mercy at this point. You have made us scum and garbage among the peoples. All of our enemies open their mouths against us. Panic and pitfall have come upon us. Do you recognize some of these words from back in Deuteronomy? Like, this author has read that book. He knows what he's talking about. He is making subtle reference back and saying, you know what? It makes sense why all this has happened. And shall we not accept the good and the bad from God? Because he offered both, and we chose the bad. My eyes flow with rivers of tears because of the destruction of the daughter of my people. That's referring to the city of Jerusalem. My eyes will flow without ceasing, without respite, until the Lord from heaven looks down and sees. So in spite of him knowing that, yes, they deserve what came to them, they asked for it in the making of a covenant, like the one that they did. This is how people made covenants back then. They said, let me be killed, let me be destroyed if I violate my word. Let heaven and earth look upon this and see. Let God hold me to this. And God holds them to it. In the presence of the Most High, to deny a man justice. So this is really just a footnote To do these things the Lord does not approve. Would the Lord then violate his own nature? He cannot. And so, he believes that there is still hope. So even in spite of prayers not coming through, he is still going to try to get through. My eyes cause me grief at the fate of all the daughters of my city. I have been hunted like a bird by those who were my enemies without cause. They flung me alive into the pit and cast stones on me. Water closed over my head. I said, I am lost. Now this, because we know who's writing this, there's an actual story of this happening. I believe it's over in the book of Chronicles, though it could also be in the book of Jeremiah. Let's see if they cross-referenced it here. Hunted like a bird, flung me into the pit. Jeremiah 37 and 38. Let's see. It's always interesting to me when poetry aligns with history. Was it Isaiah? Jeremiah 37 and 38. So Jeremiah is warning Zedekiah, and then he gets cast into a cistern. So a cistern is a place that holds water, and usually it would be very soft clay at the bottom. And if you're cast in to the depths of the pit, the water is going to close over your head. He said, I'm lost. And just before he dies, he was rescued from the mud. Interesting, he talks about water because it says there was no water in the cistern. However, this is very personal to the writer right now. This is what happened. Basically, justice was not happening in this city. God is doing his part of the covenant. I experienced this, and then I did this before. So this is now another little subsection. This is what happened. I was hunted like a bird. I said, I am lost. I called on your name, O Lord, from the depths of the pit. You heard my plea. Do not close your ear to my cry for help. You came near when I called on you. You said, do not fear. So last time I was in trouble, you came and rescued me. I thought I was going to die before, and I didn't. You have taken up my cause, O Lord. You have redeemed my life. You have seen the wrong done to me, O Lord. Judge my cause. You have seen all their vengeance, all their plots against me. So apparently this is still going on. You have heard their taunts, O Lord, all their plots against me. The lips and thoughts of my assailants are against me all the day long. Behold, they're sitting and they're rising. I am the object of their taunts. We're back to being personal here. And I'm actually going to pull this off because this whole section is now a switch back to his experience. Whereas if you see this, all our enemies, see? You have made us, let us test. So we move from us up here to his experience down here. So a shift in focus, and he is sticking with his experience all the way through here, and now really talking about the leaders of the people who didn't like him at all. You will repay them, O Lord, according to the work of their hands. This is such an interesting scheme because we talk a lot in Christianity about how it's not like we receive the good and the bad based on what we do, but here, you will repay them according to the work of their hands. David writes like this all the time. Repay me, O Lord, according to the work of my hands. Do to me according to what I have done. We look at this and Christianity has entirely lost this concept. And I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. I don't know that it's not, but it's just interesting to see it so blatantly put out here. This is not like a theological treatise. This is simply insight into how this prophet Jeremiah sees God functioning in the world. You will repay them, O Lord, according to the work of their hands. You will give them dullness of heart. Your curse will be on them. You will pursue them in anger and destroy them from under your heavens, O Lord. All right, pursued him, place your curse given, yep. Huh. This is reminding me now of coming back over to the lawsuit. I think Jeremiah is personally wrapped up in what has happened here. He's not just talking about the city, he's also talking about himself. Like, can you imagine? He was called as a prophet to save the city. And instead of succeeding, he watches the whole thing be destroyed, and he's personally attacked by the people he was sent to save. This is just tragedy upon tragedy for this guy, and no wonder this book is called Lamentation. And it's interesting because, this whole thing, chapter 3, we've gone through a lot of text here. We have this turnaround from hopelessness to hope, and the hope is based on who God is, this idea that God sends both the good and the bad, and that the people who have experienced this trouble, they can change. Even though, in his experience, they have been absolutely terrible to him. And those who were against the prophet are going to be destroyed. So you kind of get some of his thought process from a man who lived so long ago. And it's incredible that he took the time to put all of this into words and to hide all of this meaning in text, so that it could come to us through time, and that we could understand a little bit more about how God related to his people. To some extent, we can say how God relates even to this day. But I also want to make note that this is the book of Lamentations. It is in the Old Testament, and the New Testament puts such an incredible shift on this whole Old Testament story. When Jesus shows up in the world, everything changes. And I'm hoping we'll spend a little bit more time in the New Testament, because what Jesus teaches is absolutely incredible. And if Jeremiah had heard that, oh my gosh, I cannot even imagine. But that's it for today. Hope to hear from you. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think.